Thank you for joining us if you are watching this live, and thank you very much for joining us if you're watching it across the podcast or YouTube or later on. And Thomas and I are very excited today about the talk because we're going to be talking about quite an interesting business, or two businesses, very interesting, very mind expanding in terms of what they do. But beneath that, in terms of what they actually do, they're going to talk about their philosophy about working together in partnership, collaboration, how to build long-term business relationships, which I'm really excited about because I often think anybody watching this is going to be a networker, I'm sure. Anybody in business is going to be a networker, apart from anybody else who does it brilliantly in their pub at home. And one thing that a lot of networkers miss is that sort of having that vision, that peripheral vision of networking, not just because they're hunting down that client, but looking for ways to work with other people where one and one makes a lot more than two. So I'm very excited about this. Excuse me. So excited that I've just lost my voice. Oh gosh, I've gone into, what do I sound like now? A Dalek.
You're all live. You're all live on LinkedIn.
I'm live and I'm a Dalek now. So BIP Chat, for anybody that's not watched this before, it stands for Business is Personal. And this is a chat that we have with our citizens of the BIP 100 community. And this is a community that Thomas and I have been forming over 18 months now, where we search out experts in their field to join our community, but also look for particular values, particularly around life's not just about me, it's about being a great person and a citizen, and people who have really built great social capital around the values they have. And it's really fantastic to have our BIP 100 member, Paul Mercer, with us, who Thomas and I have actually been on a journey all the way through COVID with. He's an exceptional man. He worked with us in our mastermind. And our mastermind is where we bring business owners together to share and do peer-to-peer growth together. And Paul has just been the most phenomenal support to the people within that mastermind. Unofficially, I'd say coaching them, but officially making a real impact on their lives, not just by the skills that he has in business, but by amazing mindset of true love and empathy to people in business. So we're introducing you to a really good man today, Paul Mercer. And Paul is the founder of this business, Portable Power Technology. And if you want to look that up as a URL, the technology is tech, so portablepowertech.com. And he's been in this world a long time, helping, basically helping people go off grid. And if you go onto that site, you'll see there's some amazing case studies, all the way from helping schools in Kenya, overland vehicles for Africa, supporting through the pandemic, helping with the test and trace and converting vehicles for that. There's even a gin bar that he's supported, portable cafes. So if you can imagine, if you have the inspiration to create something where you think you want to take that out and about, and it's going to be off grid, Paul is your man. And for some time, Paul, you have been working with Lianne, who is our guest. Would you like to introduce Lianne?
I would, yeah. I'm really excited to introduce Lianne. I've known Lianne for probably around about 11 years, and Lianne was Group Purchasing Manager for Bri Stor Systems, which is our most valuable customer. And we forged a really strong working relationship and personal relationship, I guess. People doing business with people, and I think we created a relationship which has done good things for both my business and hopefully done good things for Bri Stor as well. So yeah, really excited and privileged to have Lianne on the sofa with me.
Yeah, it adds a really exciting dimension to this. So Lianne, you've gone through a recent rebranding as well. I saw when I went onto LinkedIn, and I see behind you there with your company, Hex. So tell us a little bit about Hex.
So the Hex group has divisions within. So people, and Paul would know me better as Bri Stor, but within the Bri Stor side of the business, there's a graphics business as well, which also happens to be called Hex Graphics. But within the group, so you've got Hex, the Hex Group, which is Bri Stor, which Hex Graphics is a division of. You've got Alpha Manufacturing, and you've got Hex Living, which is just a diverse difference in manufacturing. We do leisure equipment, we do hurdlers, we do all sorts of things, anything that can be manufactured. Bri Stor Systems is the vehicle conversion side of the business, and that's where Paul and I first met all those years ago. You know, I required a certain product at that time, and as all good purchasing managers do, you get onto the internet, you do your research, you whittle down samples, and you find somebody that you feel is not just right for your business, but for your customers as well. You know, it's got to be a collaboration across the whole supply chain. You know, my opinions don't matter, it's the facts. The product's got to be correct, it's got to be type approved, it's got to do the job that it's brought in to do. And that's where Paul and I met 11 years ago. And it's not been an easy ride, as in it's never going to be easy if something's worthwhile. So that's who we are, and that's why we're here today.
Yeah, and I suppose the two of you, many people listen and empathise with, even if it's just watching the news and it's not actually directly impacting their business. You talk about the supply chain, and yeah, so I'm sure through this period you've been through some big challenges. But what's comes through really clearly here and also in our pre-chat is how close you are as a working relationship, the respect you obviously have for one another's businesses and each other's business needs, which is fantastic. So it's good to learn about how you've met, and I think it's, did you say nearly 11 years you've worked together in some capacity.
Yeah.
So how let's talk quite first of all about your business, Paul, because I think it is important. You've been a businessman for a number of years. Won't give away your age.
A lot
of years. Paul has got a lot more wisdom than his very baby face will gives away. I thought when I met Paul he was about 35, but actually nearly 20 years to that, I think. So there's a lot of wisdom in there. Tell us about your journey of building your business and what you're doing, and then we will go on to more of these philosophies.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, portable power technology, you know, it's, as a business, we're just really passionate about power and delivering power solutions to people and companies that require clean, renewable energy sources where it's not available. And we try and kind of stay away from sort of the large scale commercial, you know, providing huge large scale power on buildings and the like. Really what we're about is providing sort of temporary or movable type power, or portable power, clearly, so that you can provide energy for a finite amount of time to cover some application. And so that could be, you know, providing lighting or something in like in glamping infrastructure sites, or for film studios, or for news gathering, or for mobile catering vehicles. And obviously in the case of Bri Stor, what we do for them is to provide auxiliary power systems that go into commercial vehicles. And those fleets of vehicles could be anything from, you know, utility companies, electric utility companies, railway service vehicles, welfare vehicles for what you see on the side of the motorway to bring workers in and out of construction sites. They all demand power within those vehicles to provide services like microwave ovens or kettles, or for power tool charging and the like. So we have to provide that power and then a way to recharge that system, generally on the move as well. And so that's, you know, really the premise of what we do. We don't just work in one application. We go wherever and whenever somebody needs energy and power. And yeah, it's a fascinating and really interesting business. And but
it's so diverse. The solutions that you've come up with are so diverse, and as some of them that I listed off, as some of them the ones that you've worked with Lianne on.
Trim It is obviously a project that I worked with Bri Stor And
So that's
It's the
bringing,
haircut one.
yes,
that's
the mobile
barbers.
hairdressing one. Yeah. So yeah, we've done that together. Other ones are really, if you look through and you look at sort of the commercial vehicle area of our website, you'll see more about specifically fitting auxiliary power systems into commercial vehicles. And Bri Stor, Lianne didn't really say, but not to to make the point, Bri Stor is the UK's biggest light commercial vehicle converter. It does all the major commercial fleets across the UK.
Wow.
For all of the major companies, it's by far the largest. And so for us as Portable Power Technology, we're always quite honoured and humbled that we get to do that with such a big company.
It sounds so easy, Paul. You've earned your stripes. It's that, as we were saying about the supply chain before, it can be very, very challenging. Not just about sourcing the right products that do the right job. It's getting them on time. It's getting them into the country. It's making sure that build doesn't stop. It's making sure vehicles go out on time. But beyond that, the customer service, the warranty, making sure that what you do supply and what you do offer your customers, you don't just close the door when they've received their vehicles. If they have problems in the field, we're there to support. And Paul's been very, very good at the supporting side of things, which is really important. It's not just the price. So it's very important for us that we can offer after service to our customers, invariably on a 3 or 5 year warranty. And when that question was first asked of Paul, he didn't hesitate, which was key for me, because that meant he had confidence in his product. If people hesitate when you ask about warranty or ask for extra money, then you know that, aren't you confident in what you're selling me?
Yeah. So your product, Paul, do you bring components in and then you're creating these solutions for people like Bri Stor?
Yeah, some of them can be just almost like relatively basic type systems where it might just require like 3 or 4 components that come together that are wired into the vehicle to provide 230-volt power. And then a way to recharge that from the alternator, and it may require solar and things like that too. And then we have much more sophisticated intelligent systems that are lithium based, like the Trimit system, where these store and deliver very large amounts of power and are, if you like, critical to the whole purpose of the vehicle. So in the case of Trimit, the barber can't do this job without having this power inside the vehicle. So our job is to be able to deliver that energy day in, day out, and the barber know that he can drive from A to B and B to C and C to D, and know that he's got enough energy to do this, because that's his livelihood, and that's what the franchise is about for Trimit. So that they vary in kind of complexity, and we developed one of the things that I guess we'll probably touch on is the fact that for the way that we work with Bri Stor is not just as a, if you like, a supply chain partner in delivering product, but is really to innovate, to listen to them as a business, understand what they need and what they're going to look for in the future, and then go off and hopefully come up with something that is that they might want and that we can provide them, and that will keep them on an edge technology wise, and keep them as the #1 converter in the UK. And so
who conceived
engineering doing that as well?
Who conceived the idea of a mobile barber? Because I didn't even know that was a thing until you mentioned that on one of our masterminds.
So that was Trimit, and I met Trimit, the guys from Trimit about 4 years ago, straight out of university, and they came to me with this idea that they were going to set up a mobile barbering service and buy a vehicle, and how were they going to put power into it. And so we supported them initially with very basic setups, and when they were ready and they'd raised money, and we then introduced them as well to Bri Stor. And
honestly, so it's a two-way street. You're introducing business both ways.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think that's the important thing. Again, in the early days, we were just talking about inverters, which are a very important part of the build at that time. And since then, we've commissioned Paul to go out and look at all sorts of different innovation. You know, we can't ever promise anything, but his determination to give Bri Stor a solution has always come through. You know, we're just entering into a new phase now with new products. And so the collaboration works both ways. You know, he understands what Bri Stor need to do. We communicate that to Paul. We even introduce him to our customers so he can understand from the customer's point of view where we're trying to get to. So, you know, it's a very open book approach. You know, we're just here to give the end user the best solution.
And Lianne, do you sit down at the start of the year with Paul and say, these are all the things we're trying to achieve, and then he tries to figure out what he can and can't support you on?
So it would be nice if it was. The pitfalls about the business that we're in with in the vehicle industry is that we don't have a fixed build schedule. So we're not building the same vehicle each month. We're building various different contracts month in, month out. So when Paul used to like to sit down with me to say, oh, so what we're going to use next year, Lianne? Say, well, I'll tell you next year, Paul, when I know what's coming through, what vehicles are available. So it can be quite challenging. That's why it's key to have the communication. And you know, you can have any different variables of contracts going through each month. And what we try to do is standardize the production range to give us half a chance, but it could be quite challenging at times. So yeah, we do as best as we could, and then at the end of the year perhaps look at each other and say we just about got away with that.
Got about away with it. So I like that. Oh, sorry, Thomas, did you want to carry on with that?
I was just going to say, well, how does it work, Lianne, if you win a contract to fit out some vans, it takes Paul 5 months to get the equipment because of the supply chain delays. How does your demand and his supply fit together?
Well, the best bit of information you can use is historical information because it's already happened. So you know that you can use that as a gauge. So say, for instance, we use a certain quantity to over 2 or 3 years. He can kind of use that as a gauge to what the next year is going to be, plus or minus a percentage depending on contracts being won. And then obviously with his own experience, adding a little bit of a container load here and a container load there. I know that sounds a little bit, but that's literally how it works. You know, we can't people purchase orders for things that we don't know are going to happen. So again, it's I would use the word trust as well. Would you, Paul? That, you know, Paul would trust what I would tell him with what was coming through and how we were going to deal with it, and he'd take that information and make the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question as well, Thomas, I mean, although the supply chain end to end on some of our stuff at the moment is 5 months, that would be for stuff that we haven't already planned, forecast, or understood what we're going to need. We know month to month, quarter to quarter, roughly what we're going to need in the way of products, material for different for our B2C, B2B channels, industrial, commercial. And then, for example, for Bri Stor, we will know that we're going to need certain components, and based upon history and various builds, it's going to be this amount. And it is a bit finger in the air. But, you know, this is why as a company, I have a very high value of stock. And so, for example, the orders that Bri Stor placed on us last week, I've got to start delivering to them in August, which is only, we're talking about 6 weeks, 7 weeks away, not 5 months. And so we've already got a certain element already there in order to fulfill the startup of these orders. And then we already have material in pipeline, and we already have stuff in build. And then we just accelerate that as we need to catch up, which is generally the way it tends to work. But fulfilling the obligations is always hard, and it made harder at the moment. But that's what we do. That's what we have to do. And my sales team, they're constantly, well, we need this and we need that, or we haven't got enough of this, or we haven't got enough of that. When's this arriving? And etc. And it's impossible. It's an impossible task to ever get completely right, as I'm sure Lianne would agree from her side when she's doing that. I'm just one element of the supply chain. Lianne would have had all of these other elements in there too to have to.
It's almost perfect.
Sorry.
It's always perfect. It always works out.
Always perfect. So if I backtrack a bit with you, Paul, you did engineering, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
engineering.
Electronic.
Engineering. And you've built a substantial business. So I've got 3 questions I want to talk to you about around sort of general business things. So you did engineering and then you learned business. What was that journey like for you to go through that?
Well, I think I was always an engineer, or that was my whole thing. I was always fascinated with just how things worked, and I was fortunate enough to do a 5-year engineering apprenticeship with British Aerospace, and that was, that was amazing. But I quickly learned that I was interested in selling, and so the next thing really was to learn to sell, and ended up working for various companies, semiconductor companies, etc., and in the end becoming like an agent for global companies, introducing their technology and products into the UK. And so I think it was just an all-round sort of learning, an all-round sort of business skill set. None of that comes quickly, none of that comes out of a book, and it just takes time. But I suppose I also, as well as being fascinated with how things work, I've always I love overcoming the challenges and the problems that are associated with business, and learning and understanding that. And to me that's the fun bit. But you can't be good at everything, and your question is one of how can an engineer become a good business person, or maybe a good business person become an engineer. But I don't think you have to be perfect at either of those two things. And when
you've been supporting, and I know it's a great love of yours, is to support other business owners. Is there anything sort of commonality of the sort of things you find they need help with when you're talking through things with them?
I think more often, yes. I think more often than not, the initial spark or recognition is often one of confidence, sort of belief, or procrastination, and just not being able to apply the knowledge and make a decision on something. And I think that for a very, very long time, that was a very big problem for me in my life. And over the years, I think I've managed to conquer that more and more. And so yes, I can do the practical business stuff and the overcoming some of just the practicalities of running a business. But I find more often than not, the people that I kind of really spark with are the people that I already know can do that. It's just that they don't yet know it themselves.
Yeah. And what's the ratio of what you love most, the engineering problem solving or the running of a business as a ratio?
That's going to be a 50-50, isn't it? Or phone a friend.
Yeah, probably. I mean, there were times like more recently where I've just not been that involved in the innovation and the technical side so much, because I've been firefighting other stuff. So, and then I miss that. And then when I'm too much into the business element, I get fed up with that bit too. So I tend to kind of flip flop. I need a bit of both of those things in my life. So you're probably not a million miles away from that, to be honest, Thomas, which is one of 50-50. But the end of the day, you can wrap all those things up in anyway into the same thing. What we do with Bri Stor is to sell, innovate, deliver product, overcome business challenges, and hopefully make Bri Stor's business easier, more profitable, and give them a journey and an experience that enables them to do what they need to do without having to worry about the power element of it. We're the experts in that. And I think that the thing to get across in these collaborations and partnerships is this synergy and this need for both parties to be able to get something more than just we're supplying a product and Bri Stor needs a product. there has to be more than that. And I'm fortunate enough that we've managed to create and forge that kind of relationship, and I love it. I'm always proud of that relationship, and we'll always talk about the business that we do with Bri Stor. And there have been challenges, whether we've had quality challenges of getting product into line, creating production stops, not pricing changes, all of the stuff you would expect to happen. But through all of that, clearly I have a professional job to do. Lianne, as group purchasing at the time, had a professional job to do. We still managed to do that in a really good way. And I think that when you come through all of those challenges, all that does is just reinforces the relationship and the collaboration. And you have to pass. It's good that you get those challenges and those difficulties, because it's only at those times do you really know and understand what I'm going to do in those circumstances, and then I understand how Bri Stor deal with those things too. So,
and Lianne, do you have a standard where you want to bring all your suppliers up to like the Paul standard?
Well, you see,
I mean, is he tier 1, tier 2, is he a standard by which you try and make all your suppliers behave?
We have a very, very strong and good supply chain. So Paul would be a shining example of our supply chain. There's lots of different products that we buy. There's some products that we just buy off the shelf that you don't have any communication with the supplier. So, it depends on the category that the product that you're purchasing falls in. Obviously, if it's high value or if it's very specific to a job, then, you have to have a stronger relationship with the supply base. You just have to, because you're never given anything on paper. You don't have anything written down to say this is what's going to happen tomorrow and this is how it needs to be done. So you have to communicate that. You have to have very, very strong communication skills. And Paul and I it probably wasn't easy in the beginning, because we work at such a rate that some suppliers struggle to keep up with, and you soon find out who can keep pace and who can't. And it's never a bad thing to turn around to a supplier to say, look, you're just not for our business, because it actually benefits them. We don't want to ever become an issue to anybody. We want our suppliers to grow with us. In 6 months, 6 years' time, we want them to be as successful as we are. So, Paul is a very, very good example as what you would call a tier 1 supplier. We do have many of them, but Paul and I do have a very good relationship when it comes to, let's say, picking up that phone to say, we have a problem. He never questions why are you in this situation? Okay, understood, we'll get it sorted. And that's how it needs to be. We can talk about the problem later, but let's get it sorted, because that's the main action at that time.
Very good. Very good.
A set of sort of strong set of business values coming through here. Paul, if I say to you, what are your values in business? So.
I agree. I think the grounding of any good business relationship like ours with Bri Stor, we have a set of values that everybody in this team stands by, and we kind of try and migrate that out of here into our customers. And so really, honesty, integrity, loyalty, just always trying to do the very best that we can do. We enjoy our work, we love our work, we're passionate about what we do. So, we want to firstly impart that knowledge and that education into our customers, whether that's an individual B2C customer or a big customer like Bri Stor, and we do that openly and honestly, without being guarded or without feeling that we have to protect ourselves or our intellectual property or anything like that. Those values are I think what sets us apart from a lot of companies. And so when for example, like my values align with Lianne's values within Bri Stor,
Yeah.
that's when you get that's when the magic happens, because, you know, I know that when Lianne says something to me, that it's 100% the truth. And she knows that when she asks me something, she's going to get exactly the same kind of response. I'm not talking about we're lying to each other or anything. We're just talking about having a relationship whereby we can be brutally honest about where we're at and what we need to do so that we can achieve things together. Sometimes they're not always easy, and sometimes Lianne would ask the impossible of me.
You take the emotion out of it, the facts remain the same. This is what needs to happen. That's when it needs to happen. And I think that's the really important thing, is that, you know, we concentrate on just that. Opinions don't matter, really, and it's never personal. You know, I think one of my biggest statements that I've always come out with is no is not an option. There is always a solution. You know, if it's getting something from A to B, it can't happen. There's a traffic jam. There's always an option, and there's always a solution. So we don't like to use the word no. We always find a way around it.
Yeah, I can see how well you both get on with that. So yeah, I mean, I get a feeling that there's a real importance of this sort of transparency of, you know, I'm not holding back any information at all. It's not just waiting for the right question. It's, you know, proactively, you know, standing naked in front of each other, metaphorically, and saying this is what's happening.
Yeah, it is. And not just from a supply chain perspective, but as I say, you know, from an engineering perspective, we do engage on a technical basis with the technical team within Bri Stor on new developments, on new projects, on I'll get a call, or where I'll walk in there with something new, or we've developed, you know, a new system or a new product specifically for a Bri Stor application. And so often purchasing or the commercial end of that won't even start to see that until this end is tested, trialed and approved over here. And so through all of that, you know, I'm having to make decisions about when to push the button, when do we commit as to when we're going to need that in here. And that can be a long way from purchasing and a long way from the commercial end of that. So there's quite a complex chain. And I think that the key to a lot of this is that, you know, over time you get to know. I don't know Bri Stor's business, but I get a feel. You get an emotional feel for what they do, how they do it, and what's expected. And over time, you can almost start to second guess that stuff to the point where you know you can get it right a lot of the time, and you can start to influence that. And we do that influencing from a technology perspective, because, for example, we know some of the challenges that Bri Stor is going to have going forward with electric vehicles, with the changes over to different technologies. How are they going to use our kinds of products? How are they going to provide auxiliary power? How are they going to be recharged? All of this kind of stuff. So, you know, where, if you like, the extension of them with regards to technology. So we're already thinking about those things, and we're already starting to bring the answers to them before they even ask the questions. And
yeah,
so,
that's brilliant.
Oh, I see. So Bri Stor, you've got to shift a lot of vehicles over to electric EVs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've done quite a number of electric vehicles, because that's the way you know, the world's going. So it's been quite a big step change, and you know, the public are seeing it now. But obviously, we've been working on it for quite a long time. But it's not just the connection that Paul has with me. I'm a great believer in sharing the information and sharing the relationship with the technical engineers here, the engineering manager. So when Paul comes to Bri Stor, if I'm not around, it's not a problem. I've introduced him to all the right people, and you know, they have as much respect for him as I do, and he can have a conversation with, you know, from the MD down to the guys that fit the auto electricians on the shop floor. So, you know, Paul and some of the key account managers as well will say to me, can I give Paul a call to, you know, discuss it? Of course. You know, so you've got a connection with, you know, most of the people you need to be connected to here at Bri Stor, don't you? So And
It
that's
sounds a bit like, you know, Intel Inside. Do you remember was it in the 80s and 90s? Every computer had the sort of Intel Inside. And it sounds like that sort of relationship where it's so integral that it almost powers a lot of your success, Lianne. And obviously, in return, Paul is achieving growth in his business whenever you grow.
Paul provides solutions to some of the issues that we either have. You know, we'll talk them through with him, but also his business can grow on the back of that. And that's what I talked about previous. You know, we want our supply chain to be successful. We want them to grow with us, not just because of us, but with us. You know, so it is a partnership in the truest form. It's not just a cliche statement. It is a partnership in its truest form.
And in that 11 years, Lianne, if you go back to when it begun, the first order to last week's order, what's the magnitude of growth it's gone through?
Massive. So probably say, let's put it on a scale from about a £5 order to now to tens of thousands of pounds orders. So it's a big,
hundreds of thousands of pounds orders. Yes.
Exactly. So
wow.
Started off as I always do with any supplier. You know, we've got to check them out, that their website just isn't a shop front for something that they're not. You know, there was a lot of development that went on in the early days, and type approval also changed everything for how we work as well. Everything's got to be type approved. It's got to have a certificate. You know, you can't just go out there and buy things off the shelf. It's got to be the right product through the right people. And so Paul's enjoyed that growth, but as I say, it's not always been easy. There's been a time when Paul's been sitting at the airport waiting for inverters to come off the plane to then go into customs, you know, to give me a call and me to say, and I still need my product. So, you know, you've sat at the airport, haven't you, Paul, waiting?
We have, yeah. Me and David did that a number of times, literally in the early days, just like, you know, it was so important to get goods up to you, you know, it just, yeah.
Stressful waiting for customs clearance.
This was in the early days where we were just flying stuff in quickly, and the demand was high, and you know, and Lianne's on the phone going, I've got vehicles here and I've got no inverters to put in them. When they arrive in, and I'd, you know, and we knew that they'd left Asia and they were on a plane and they'd arrived into Heathrow, but we hadn't managed to get them cleared, and we'd have to meet one of our agents up there and wait in the compound for them to come out of the other side and then sling them in our boot or get a vehicle to drive them up to Bri Stor to get them onto line.
Stressful.
That's stuff you do, right?
Incredibly stressful, but also huge excitement as well. It's you're really in the thick of it, which I feel I love that. Yeah. I love that. So as we go towards a close, I'm imagining, like the Trimit people, I mean, that's a great example of some entrepreneur out there thinking, I wish somebody did this solution of bringing something to our door. Do they sort of contact you, Paul? How would they go about that? Do people do a search for, how do I create a vehicle that does this? If somebody has an entrepreneurial thought, what's their actions that they take that ends up leading them to you, Paul?
What, for power, you mean, specifically?
Yeah, when they know that they
I mean, we spend probably a stupid amount of money with Google, as everybody does, and we work on, you know, keywords and around specifically people looking for, how do I power a glamping site? How do I power my studio? How do I power my vehicle? You know, mobile coffee catering, mobile fish and chip van, mobile farrier, mobile key cutting, you know, whatever it may be. And obviously we focus on the power element of all of that. We do a lot of case study stuff now, much more so than we used to. And obviously off the back of a lot of that generates a lot more search engine type stuff to enable people, because the applications are so diverse, and actually it's almost impossible. And day to day, you know, I'll talk to my team in here and they'll still go, do you know what? I never thought we would see somebody who wanted to do something like this. You just go, I never even thought that somebody would want something to do something like this. So it's like every day we still have surprises around what people need. Up cranes down mines, you know, in films.
And this is why so they come to you, and this is why then you would need somebody to also help them with that vehicle conversion.
If it was, well, if it was a vehicle, yes. So if we're talking about, particularly if it's in vehicle, if it was a fleet and we're doing the power in that, and they ask us to help recommend someone who's going to do that conversion for them, then initially, assuming that the build is significant and the volume is big enough, then we would introduce to Bri Stor Systems. Yeah,
it's lovely, isn't it? Lovely when you consider exactly that, you know, anything is possible, isn't it?
I think on average we do anything from between 9,000 conversions a year of all sorts of variations. So,
and what's been one of the sort of really, can you think off the top of your head one that's just really unusual and quite exciting as a case study?
The Trimit was very unusual, but we do lots of welfare vehicles, utility vehicles. There's all sorts that go on here. If it can go into the back of the vehicle and it is in line with legislation, then, you know, we'll be happy to help. Any light commercial vehicle that needs weight saving or space saving, then that's what Bri Stor do.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, it's been really fascinating to, you know, to talk through the manufacturing, the creation, the supply chain, the values, the procurement, all of these things. It's been wonderful to talk about today. So going forward, if you've listened to this and you'd like to get in touch with Paul Mercer, he's on LinkedIn, as is Lianne Butler, and Lianne spelled Lianne. I don't think I need to spell Paul or Mercer. I think people are quite safe with that.
Yeah.
So the vehicle conversions is with Lianne and Paul Mercer, who's supplying these off-grid solutions. And it's really worth, just not that I know you want loads of traffic, loads of pointless traffic to your site, Paul, but I would suggest after this you go and look at portablepowertech.com, because the case studies are just incredible. You know, as I said, there's, you know, Africa, Kenya, cafe trucks, gin trucks. It's just amazing what you do. It's very, very exciting. And
thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you, for your time today. It's been a great conversation.
No, thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Lianne. Really appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thank you.